the whole big deal. I'm going to Disneyland.
Hello,
Right. I do remember that.
Hello, Mario.
how are you?
Great. How are you doing?
Good, good, thank you.
Are we going to be working out of the new volume today?
We're
Yeah.
starting the new one.
Yes.
This one's going to take more than a half a year to do. This is a mega volume.
It's a phone book.
But you're expected to memorize it by the
Continued Yoredeya. We're going to be dealing with Yoredeya Tet Zion. And the subject is the laws of food forbidden due to potential danger. Right? Dvorim asur mishum sakana. Tonight we'll learn eating fish and meat together and eating fish with dairy. Page 23.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's for you. So, page 23. Most of the subjects related to kashrus that we have already discussed pertain to specific foods or combinations of foods that are forbidden either by the Torah as non-kosher or by Chazal due to specific halachic concerns. There's another category of foods that were forbidden by Chazal out of concern for danger to those that consume them. In this year, we will analyze the halachot of some of the most common examples of such foods, including eating fish and meat together and consuming liquids left unattended. The Torah states, "V'nishmartem me'od l'nafshotechem." You shall take great care of your souls. This pasuk is interpreted as a directive to remain safe and healthy and not engage in dangerous activities. Wear masks, for example, so that one is capable of serving Hashem properly. Moreover, the Gemara in Chulin declares, Chamira sakonta me'isura. Danger is more severe than a prohibition. That means certain halachos, if it has to do with sakana, we treat it even more stringently than isur. Meaning that one should be more strict concerning issues of danger than concerning issues of a standard prohibition. For example, basar v'cholov. The Rambam went so far as to declare that one who engages in a dangerous action is liable for makas mardus, rabbinic lashes, given for rebelliousness, which were legislated by a Beit Din. Says the Rambam, Harbe dvorim asru chachamim, v'nei sheyesh behem sakonas nefashos. Chazal prohibited things because there's danger to life. The kol over aleim, whoever does them, the Omar, and says, Hareini mesukan batzmi, I'm going to put myself in danger. Who cares? What do other people care what I want to do to myself? Oh, eini makpid al kach, or I don't care. Makinotso makas mardus. So the Rabbanan have the power to give him makas and bezdin. And the Rambam lists activities that are forbidden, like leaving liquids uncovered, drinking from a river at night, placing coins in one's mouth, walking under a shaky wall. It means don't put yourself in a dangerous situation. So one of the most famous examples of food consumption that are labeled as dangerous by Chazal is that of fish and meat. This is also the example that most closely mirrors some of the rules of Isser V'Heter of Basar B'Challah. Though as we will see, the rules are not exactly the same. The source for this is the Gemara in Psachim 76b, which states that cooking or roasting meat and fish together is forbidden because it may cause leprosy. Ahi beinasa is a fish, the itva b'hadi bisra, that was roasted with meat in the same oven. Asra rabba miprisiska lemechla bekutach. Rabba prohibited you from eating that fish with dairy mayonnaise. Now, that's obvious because when you cook an uncovered piece of fish with an uncovered piece of meat, so there's going to be transfer through recha and through zay. I mean, if there's fluid, there'll be transfer of the blias. And you didn't cook them together in the same. Let's say you cooked a piece of meat and a piece of fish in an oven uncovered. So the fish will be prohibited to be eaten with milk because it absorbs meat flavors through what it didn't touch. So there's two issues. One is called reicha, the other called is zeya, steam. Now, if there's no water, there would be no zeya, but there would be reicha. Now, reicha, we're going to see, was a machlokas that we learned before. We can be more lenient regarding reicha. We'll see that in a minute. Now, that's Rabbah. Marbar of Ashi Omar, that if you roasted a piece of meat and fish together in the oven, not in the same dish, not in the same pot, but in the same oven, so afil b'milchanami asura. You cannot eat the fish with salt. I mean, you can't eat the fish at all. Mishum de kashya l'reicha. It's bad for bad breath, Harold. Ula dover acher. And something else that the Meforshim in the Gemara says for leprosy. Therefore, you shouldn't eat that fish. So according to the first opinion of Rava, the fish is only forbidden to be eaten with dairy. It means you can eat the fish, you just can't eat it with dairy because the fish has absorbed fleishik tam, right? Due to the absorbed meat flavor. While according to the second opinion of Marbar Avashi, it's forbidden to eat the fish alone because it was cooked together with meat, and consuming such fish could be dangerous. So this is the source in the Gemara that shows us that the meat and fish together is dangerous. Now, despite the fact that the issue of eating the fish is not a halachic one per se, according to Marbar Avashi, the Shulchan Aruch codified his position as the halacha in two different places. One here in Yoredeya, and the other in Orach Chaim. Says the Shulchan Aruch here, tzarich lizor shelo lechol basar v'dag biyachad. You have to be careful not to eat meat and fish together, mipnei shekasher l'tzaras, because it can cause leprosy. The Ramah holds that although one may not eat fish and meat together, roasting them together and then eating them separately is only forbidden lechatchila due to reicha, transferred from one to the other. But if they were roasted together, the foods are permitted, as aroma does not render the foods forbidden b'di'evet. That means you shouldn't do it lechatchila, but if you did it and you ate it b'di'evet, it's okay.
Now, what about gefilte? Let's say we have gefilte fish, and then all of a sudden you eat the meat. Right after gefilte fish, you eat the meat. Aren't we afraid that the tom is in the meat or the meat is in the fish? Isn't that dangerous?
No, because you're not eating them at the same time. We're going to see.
But it's a few minutes. It's only, 5-10 minutes.
So
couple of minutes.
But we're going to see that you're supposed to drink something and eat something in between.
Okay.
And we will deal halachically with how to separate between you eat a piece of gefilte fish, and then later on you eat a piece of meat. We'll see how that works.
I see. Okay.
So right now we're learning that both the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah says that if you roasted a piece of meat and fish together in an oven, uncovered, lechatchila, you shouldn't eat either lechatchila. But if you did it, you could eat it. It doesn't render the foods forbidden. According to Ramah, it seems that although Marbar Avashi the Gemara forbade eating fish and meat that were roasted together, the halach is that they would be permitted b'di'evet, since many poskim hold that reicha is permitted b'di'evet. This transfer of flavor via reicha, just like through odor, some post we are lenient. Others hold, however, that they should be forbidden b'di'evet due to the concern of leprosy. Like we said, moreover, if the meat and fish were cooked together in a liquid or touched each other during the cooking or roasting process, they would be forbidden b'di'evet, even according to the Ramah. There'd be asur lechatchila and b'di'evet because of zeya. The topic of reicha we discussed before in volume 4, page 99, if you want to review the issue of reicha. So, says the Ramah, "L'chein ein litzlos basar imdag mishum reicha lechatchila." You shouldn't roast a piece of fish and meat in the same oven, uncovered. Lechatchila. Miu b'di'evet ein osur. But if you did it You don't have to throw the food away. You can eat it, each one individually, not together, obviously. Now, Jerry's question, how to separate between fish and meat? How should one separate between the eating of fish and meat? Is it done in the same way that one separates between eating dairy and then eating meat, which we learned about in volume 4? The answer to that, it is subject to machlokes between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. According to Shulchan Aruch, one must wash one's hands, rinse out one's mouth with liquid, and then rinse out one's mouth with a solid, like a piece of bread or cracker. Or, according to Shulchan Aruch, use bread soaked in a liquid, which counts as both a liquid and solid, which is essentially the same procedure as the procedure for eating dairy and then meat. For example, you want to eat, you drink a glass of milk and then you want to eat a piece of meat afterwards. We learned you need kinuach, peh, and hadacha. You need to rinse your mouth out, and then you need to eat like a cracker. And then you can eat the milk, and then you can eat the dairy. According to
meat.
Ramah,
You mean the opposite?
you can eat the dairy, and then you can eat the meat.
After you've had the cracker.
After you've had the cracker and you rinse the mouth out, you can eat meat after you've had some dairy. Of course, if you've eaten meat, you got to wait 6 hours, according to the normative halach. According to Ramah, though, rinsing out one's mouth with a liquid and eating a solid are sufficient. That means either. You don't have to do both, according to Ramah. As the rule of fish and meat is more lenient. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Bein basar ledagim, if you want to eat meat after fish, or you want to eat fish after meat. L'chora goes either way. And the Shulchan Aruch says you want to eat it between, right? You ate meat, then you want to eat fish. See, by milk, it doesn't work that way. By milk, if you eat meat first, you can't eat milk for 6 hours. It doesn't work the same way with meat and fish. We are customary, we eat the fish first because that's just what is done dietary-wise, but it's lav dafke. Bein basar ledagim chova litol, mishum dekasha ledavar acher, because it can cause leprosy. The chamir tzakanta misra hagah, v'ayin b'yordei simin kuf zam. Ramos sends us to Yordei, says the same thing. Says the Shulchan Aruch Yordei, yirchatz yadav, you got to wash your hands. Bein basar ledag, because we're not Sfardim. The Sfardim have to do it that way because they follow Shulchan Aruch. V'yochal pas shoy bein tayim, you eat a piece of soaked bread, kedei lirchotz piv. Says the Ramah, for us Ashkenazim, yesh oimrim dein lochush lezeh, rak shemevashlim yachad v'oichlam. First, some say we don't have to be worried about any of this. The only problem is if you cook them together. But you can eat fish and then meat, or meat and fish sequentially without doing anything. Right? Aval la'ochlan zechar zein lochush. V'chein noagim. The Ramah says that's how we practice. Shelo lirchotz hapeh. You don't have to wash your mouth out. V'lo yadai b'neim. You don't have to wash your hands. He says, "Umikol mokom yesh lechol davar b'neim v'lishtos." It's a good thing to eat something between them or drink. Dahavi kinuach v'adacha. It actually says to do both. Drink something and eat something, but not wash your hands. So that's the difference between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah.
So maybe that's their custom of having a l'chaim after you have a piece of fish.
Absolutely, but not only l'chaim, then you should have a piece of bread. Eat a challah. Eat a piece of challah.
Or something else.
I'm just reading footnote 6. Although with regard to separating between dairy and meat, the poskim recommend using separate solids and liquids rather than soaked bread, since separating between fish and meat is more lenient. Kinuach and adach are used in the context of separating between eating dairy and then meat, and that refers to eating a solid food like a cracker or bread, and drinking a liquid in order to remove the taste of the dairy food from one's mouth. And you can go back to volume 4, Basar B'Chalav 2. And I would advise, you all have the various volumes. It's a good idea to, when in these footnotes, when they remind you to go back and look, it's a good thing to go back and look. It'll just solidify A lot, it's Chazara. Now, the Sefer HaKashrus states that Sfardim are careful to separate between meat and fish in the manner described, even if they use silverware. That means even if they use silverware, you're supposed to wash your hands. Because people still use their fingers to take out bones. So he says that the Sfardim should be careful to wash your hands as well. Okay, what about our wives? Can they cook fish and meat in the same oven? We've now seen that the basic halacha, as quoted in the Gemara and Shulchan Aruch, concerning not eating or cooking meat and fish together, and how to separate between fish and meat during a meal. We can now discuss how to apply these sources in practice. Is it forbidden to cook or bake fish and meat in the same oven at the same time? The Aruch HaShulchan writes that this transfer, if you're not using liquid, is an example of reicha, where the fish and meat could transfer aroma back and forth. Therefore, we follow the standard rule concerning reicha, which is that it's forbidden lechatchila to cook them together. But if it was done, the foods are permitted b'diavad, though he notes that there are other opinions, provided the foods have not come in contact with each other. So as long as they don't touch, if it's just reicha, you shouldn't do it lechatchila. But if it was done b'diavad, the food is not prohibited. So he says that the basic rule lechatchila is not to cook meat and fish together in the same oven. Miyu b'diavad ain't also, but if you did it, it doesn't prohibit the food. The law is sakana rak derech bishul. The sakana is cooking together. But if the fat sort of touches between the two, vaday aser. Some say that if you roast it, it's lechatchila permitted because there's no zeya without fluid. There's only reicha, and some are lenient regarding reicha. The shachas prohibits even b'diavad. So what is the Aruch HaShulchan paskin? Anu ein lanu rak divrei Rabbeinu Aramah sheposak demuter b'diavad. So the Aruch HaShulchan fell back on the Ramah and said that b'diavad, if you cooked it, they're permitted. The Yalkut Yosef notes, though, that if one of the parts of either the meat or fish was covered, it's permitted to cook them in the same oven at the same time, even lechatchila. Also, litzlos dagim uvasar betanarei afia mitzum shalanu. Our ovens, shem psuchim arba amas, they're more than 4 amas square. Upischan miatzad, and you open up from the side. The chamir sakanta misura, because danger is worse than nisur. Umikol makam b'diavad in salu basav dagim betanar echad yesh lahat la'ochlam. Af im ein shishim levat latam. That means if the piece of fish was not 60 times greater than the piece of meat that you were put in there, and you cooked it together, uncovered, in the same oven, you did it, but the food is not prohibited. However, im echad mehem mechusa, you could tell your wives that if you cover one of the pans, lo shach b'zeh reicha milsa, we don't hold of reicha, umutar av lechatchila. So if you cover the meat pan, you cover the fish pan, they can both be cooked in the oven at the same time. That's an important leniency. Now, in contrast to the leniency given in this case, the Sefer HaKashrus notes that if one fries fish in oil and then fries meat in the same oil, the meat is forbidden even b'diavad. And he says the utensil should be kashered. Shemen shetignu bo dagim uvetos tignu bo oser shemen lachar became basar. Habasar also mishum sakana v'machbas tzricha hagola. It's hard to understand that because we're going to see that the danger is not through blias, but that's what the Sefer HaKashrus says.
Ernie, sorry,
Yeah.
I don't understand. It's one thing when you're talking about the Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch, but the Yalkut Yosef, we're talking about modern times. Why does he still think it's Chamira de Sakana? What is the Sakana? Certainly we know leprosy is not going to come from mixing fish and blood. I'm just trying to understand.
Bernie, that's a wonderful, you brought up a good horror, and we're going to cover that tonight, meaning how the din that Chamira Sakanta Misur doesn't go away. The question is, how do we understand it today? But once in the time of Chazal, this Gzera was made, and the issue of life-threatening issues are more stringent than Isser, that still remains. Now, we will deal with Bernie's question tonight about what do we say about, is the danger still there or not? But these are the halachic parameters that govern what it says in the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah Aruch HaShulchan. You can't throw it out. That's it. They also lived just 200-300 years ago. If it's not a sakana for us, it wasn't a sakana for them either. So how do we understand their understanding of this? We will see that. Now, what is the halacha? But clearly the halacha stands. Everything we've been learning, if you eat fish, or you have to drink something and eat something in between, or same thing, meat, and then you want to eat fish. If we learned the laws of, you can't cook it in an open oven. If you do, l'chatchila, shouldn't do it. If you did it, the food's not usher. And then l'chatchila, you can cook it l'chatchila if you cover one of the pans. Those are the halachas we've learned so far. Now, what is the halacha? Can you cook fish in a clean meat pot? You have a fleshik pot that you cooked fleshiks 2 hours ago, so it's a ben yomo pot, right? You're not allowed to cook dairy in such a pot. If you cook dairy, you're going to create basar b'cholav midaraisa because tam ke'ikr, right? If it's eno ben yomo, we don't do it either. It's just, if the pot is beyond 24 hours and you cooked milk and you cooked something dairy there, so there you have to kasher the pot. The food technically is not prohibited. We learned that because it's eno ben yomo, it's pagum. But a ben yomo pot that you cook fish in, that's what we're dealing with here. You're not eating fish with meat, you're cooking fish in a meat pot. It's interesting to note that when we learned about the halachos of not bar not, eating par food, for example, we talked about cooking spaghetti in a fleshik pot, right? That's not bar not. It's a noisen tam bar noisen tam, right? The first tam is originally the meat went into the pot. The second noisen tam is the flavor going into the water. Then it goes from the water into the spaghetti. So that's even 3 noisen tams. So it's there. You can eat that spaghetti with cheese. That's the heter of not bar not. Now, that halacha was taught to us in the Gemara in a case of fish. It was placing a par of food in a meat dish. The case that we learned in volume 4, the example brought of a par of food by the Gemara was fish. Dogim shenizbashlu, fish that was cooked with water, o shenitzlu, or was roasted, b'kedera shel basar, in a ben yomo meat pot that was cleaned well. So there's no meat residue. Shein shum shuman davukba. There's no fat in the pot. Mutter la'achlam b'kutach. You can eat the fish with cheese or with mayonnaise, with dairy mayonnaise. Mishum davi noisin tam bar noisin tam dehetera. And it isn't a prohibited noisin tam. Remember, the din of noisin tam is different if, for example, there was a dvar isser absorbed in the pot, like chazer or basar b'cholav. But here, the flavor of meat alone or dairy alone is a dvar heter. So noisin tam by dvar heter is permitted. However, if it wasn't washed well, and yesh b'mamash al pi akdera yosem echad b'shishim b'dogim, and there isn't 60 volume of the fish to overcome whatever small piece of meat was in there, then osir la'achlam b'kutach. Then, of course, you wouldn't be able to eat the fish with cheese. We're talking about only the blia, only the tam, the flavor that was absorbed in the wall of the pot that goes into the fish allows you to eat it with dairy. So according to Shulchan Aruch, then it's permitted to cook fish in a meat pot or dish that was warm, even if meat had been cooked in it shortly beforehand, provided it's clean. Thus, the concern of danger with meat and fish together appears to be limited to where they actually come in contact with each other in some way. That means mamish, meat, and fish. You see, the Gemara wasn't concerned sakana-wise to cook a piece of meat, to cook a piece of fish in a fleshik pot, because that was the example that they gave in the Gemara. So absorbing a blia flavor into fish is not problematic. The Ramah, though, was machmir concerning cooking fish in a meat ben yomo pot, and held that one may not eat the fish together with dairy. He said you need 3 noisen tam bar noisen tams, and noisen tam bar noisen tam, you would not be able to eat it directly with dairy. You need 3. That was the psak halacha that we learned back then. Yesh machmirin bitzliya ubishu le'eser noisen tam bar noisen tam, the minig leser lechatchila. The custom is to aser it. Lechatchila, you shouldn't cook it that way. But b'di'evet muter b'chol inyan. However, b'di'evet, if you cooked it already, you're allowed to eat it. It's not prohibited. Nevertheless, one can infer from the Ramah that even he would only forbid eating fish cooked in a meat pot together with dairy, lechatchila, but he would still permit eating the fish by itself. The Taz, citing the Isser Ve'eter Ha'aruch, explains that as opposed to basar b'chala, the concern for danger with respect to fish and meat does not apply to flavor of the meat absorbed in the pot used for cooking the fish. So that's a very important yesod in the whole sugya tonight, that it's cooking meat and fish together or eating meat and fish together that creates the sakana. But fish absorbing meat flavor from a pot or from a dish is not problematic.
Right.
So let's see the Taz here on your day. Yesh machmir b'tzliu bishu. This is the Taz dealing with the issue of cooking fish in a meat pot, and he brings the Ramah that yesh machmirin, that some prohibit, even though it's noisen tam bar noisen tam. Vein la'akshosh damash makan dedavka im cholav aser hadag abuf ne'atz moshari. Don't ask a kasha that from here it seems that you can't eat the fish with milk, but you can eat the fish by itself, even though it was cooked in a meat pot. Hayesh bo isra mishum sakana. No, there is still isra mishum sakana. K'moshe kosov simin kuf tazayin she'es sakonim nizbachel dagim basar. Ela shebe isra ve'eter aruch klal lamentes kosov zulu shono v'chein kol davar shu mishum plitas kelim. Any absorption from a pot ein osri mi basar l'dagim b'di'evet mishum sakonas davar acher. We don't prohibit the flavor going from the meat pot into the fish because of this sakana business. Yesh lilmud mizeh she'en sakana b'achilas dag sheyesh bo tam basar b'mashin izbashel b'kli ben yom shel basar. The fish does not get prohibited because it absorbed a meat flavor. We see many people ate hot fish that was placed on a meat plate. According to this, it should also be permitted to cook fish in a meat oven if there is no meat inside, since this is equivalent to cooking fish in a meat pot, which is permitted. Let's say somebody's designated their oven to be a fleshik oven. So according to this halacha, you can cook your fish in such an oven. The Tur, though, cites an opinion that is machmir to designate special utensils for fish. But that's not the practical halacha, gentlemen. The practical halacha, though, is that one need not designate separate fish utensils, but may use meat utensils for fish as well, as is evident from the following quotes from the Yalkut Yosef and the Shevet HaLevi, though the Shevet HaLevi comments that some are careful to do so. So the Yalkut Yosef, Pashat HaMinig Lahatul Tagim Dagim B'machmas Basar Bas Yomo. You can fry fish in a ben yomo meat frying pan, lachar shtifas amachmas, after you clean it well. Vein choshtin l'shakona sheyesh b'dogim uvosor ke'echas u'mineg Yisrael toiru. So that's clearly the halacha. Says the Shevet HaLevi, Rav Vosner, uvinyan kelim mineg oil lakel levoshel dogim b'kli basar lefech. You can, we're makel to cook fish in meat pots. He says some are very stringent and have special kalim for fish.
So according to Torah, you have to have 3 sets of forks, one for meat, one for dairy, and one for fish.
But we're not noyeg like that, Jerry.
I know, but according to at that time, the Torah, they figured they had to have 3 different kind of utensils.
That it's not the two. It's not the Shevet HaLevi was alive till 2 years ago. He lived in Bnei Brak. He says Yesh
Oh.
Machmirim. There are those that are Machmir who have a separate utensil for cooking. You always have to ask your question, Jerry. Did you see it in the Haim? You had a wonderful mother. You had a wonderful mother-in-law, Mrs. Grun. They had wonderful parents. What did you see in their homes? Did they have separate dishes? Did they have separate dishes for fish?
You know what I'm thinking about? You couldn't use the same fork for meat and then fish. You had separate fork for fish.
Yes.
Ernie, we definitely had separate for fish.
Who had separate for fish?
When we ate together, fish and
Yeah.
a meal, whatever,
Yeah.
you had a separate.
We couldn't eat the
No,
Oh,
same.
you had separate
You had
plates. It
separate
wasn't separate.
forks, even
Wasn't a
had-
separate set of dishes.
Time out.
No,
Nobody had separate fish dishes. The
No, but
Shevet
you had,
HaLevi here is
separate, you had a
saying,
separate fish knife and fork.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
fine,
Yeah.
fine.
Right.
That's not what the
Yeah.
Shevet HaLevi here is saying. Shevet HaLevi is saying some people are noyeg to have separate pots to cook their fish and separate plates, etc. That they have separate kalim, separate fish utensils.
I don't know. We had a fish plate. There was a fish plate. Okay.
No, but Walter, when you have your china, your plate that you put the fish on, you also use for salad. You might put meatballs on it. You don't know. That's not designated for fish. Yes, you
No, but
don't eat
you-
the fish on the same plate as you eat your meat. I understand.
Yeah,
that.
but I'm just telling you, today they don't have fish knives. When we grew up, there was a fish knife. What do you want me to say?
Yes,
There was. You
yes.
asked, what did they do at home? I'm telling you, you had a fish knife.
Yeah, no, I understand. But like you had a knife and a fork and a little knife. That's like Emily Post, and you eat from the outside in, and
Yeah.
that's
We
a
still
different
do.
story, huh?
Yeah. We still do.
We still do that. We all-
No plate, but
I understand.
cutlery.
we test with their knife, we have to take it away and bring them a new knife.
I know, but that's not our custom. It's not really the Ashkenazi custom.
It's not true. Everybody does that.
I always had fish cutlery,
I mean, that's everybody's, it's not separate.
not plate.
You may use meat utensils for
The
fish.
Galiciana didn't like to do that way. You know, us Litvaks, we were makpid.
Okay.
What?
The Galiciana didn't know, only knows. The Galiciana didn't do that stuff. But then, okay.
They're talking about pots.
That's because they went to the North Sea and they had fresh
I
herring.
don't believe that it was the Ashkenazi custom to have a special pot where you only cooked fish, and they were makpid not to cook their fish in meat pots.
First of all, your mother had one and my mother.
Okay, Susie is saying my mother had a separate pot, and Susie says her mother did too. Okay, what? No problem. The Minhag Yisrael
It
told.
had to do with that way it's carved. They always wanted.
They wanted a parve thing.
Yeah.
Okay, but you've learned tonight that you can cook. You can cook because the blia is not what causes the isser by the sakana. You got to cook the meat and fish together or in the oven together where you have recha. But the blia does not give you the sakana. So the minhag of the fact that you're using a separate fork, which it might be a ben yomo fork. There's no reason to aser regarding this danger between fish and meat. That's what we've learned tonight. It doesn't, the danger doesn't occur through blia. It only you can't eat meat and fish together, and you can't cook meat and fish together unless you cover one of them. But that's not halachic. That we've just learned tonight that has nothing to do with halacha. That has to do with being just,
No, you're totally wrong.
you
Custom.
take your fork and you keep it as a separate thing?
No.
You wash it separately, you keep it together. So that's what they're talking about here. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
No.
What about chicken? What about chicken or duck or turkey? Can you eat that with fish?
I don't think so.
Another aspect of halacha, fish and meat, addressed by the poskim, is the question of whether the meat referred to is limited to the meat of an animal, such as cow or lamb, or also includes poultry, such as chicken. Gentlemen, why are we going through this? Because we know that that eating chicken with milk is only osir midrabanan. It's not osir midaraisa. Basar b'cholav midaraisa is only milk with beef. Milk with chicken is osir, but only midrabanan. So then the question came in, well, this issue with meat and fish is just a sakana. So does poultry count? So the Pischei Tshuva cites the Shvut Yaakov that both are included. Basar v'dag, ein b'tshuva Shvus Yaakov, shenishal al shuman avaz, goose fat, shenis arev toch tavshel shel dagim, that they used in a fish dish. Im yesh chashash sakana b'dover olo, is there danger? Dulai ein sakana rak b'basar behema, masha ein kein ofos, maybe ofos don't apply. And then he gives another comment. Uvaragleim yesh lem kaskesas kedagim. If you look at the feet of a bird, it has scales, almost like a fish. V'heishiv dein chiluk. There's no difference between beef and chicken. And therefore, we don't mix chicken with fish either. Now, let's deal with Bernie's
Well,
question. Yes?
Dodgers won the World Series.
What score?
Yeah, 3-1.
Mazel tov.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, good.
Well, thank you, Jerry. We will always remember what we were doing when we heard who won the World Series in 2020. We were talking about fish.
Chicken and fish.
Yeah, there was
L'chaim.
rare. There was rare.
L'chaim, Bernie, the last time was 1988. I was with Shlomo. at
Susie,
the
bring us
game.
l'chaim.
Really?
Yeah,
Bring us a glass of wine.
that's right.
Ernie, Ernie,
What? Yes, Bernie.
what is psha made out of? You know, the galaretta that Galicianos
Chicken
eat?
feet, right? Chicken
Feet.
So,
Animal feet.
Was it not
Beef
customary to put that as a side dish with fish together? I'm trying to remember if that I've ever seen that together.
No,
it's just-
pucha is
no, but you-
fleshig.
pucha, but you can eat them separately. You can eat them and then wash your mouth and then eat the herring afterwards.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Now, Bernie asked the question, is mixture of fish and meat still dangerous? Although, as we have seen, there are many discussions in the halachic literature about the details of separating fish and meat, one may wonder whether the danger of leprosy, about which the Gemara and Shulchan Aruch spoke, is still relevant. After all, there are many individuals, including Gentiles and non-observant Jews, that cook and eat meat and fish together, and it does not appear that any of them have contracted leprosy as a result. The poskim therefore discuss whether the danger referred to is a physical one or some sort of more mystical danger. So, for a thorough analysis of this question of the scientific basis for this halacha, see Fred Rosner, Eating Fish and Meat Together, Is There a Danger in Tradition? And it gives you an online, I'd highly recommend that people read that. Fred Rosner is a physician. He's one of the first ones who used to write on medicine and halacha.
He's a
Fred Rosner's still
hematologist.
alive.
Practiced in,
Bernie, I think he's still alive.
he practiced in Brooklyn. He was a hematologist.
Correct. And he was a real pioneer in writing, medical halachic material, Fred Rosner. So if you don't have tradition, you can look it up on the online thing. So he says like this, if it is the former that that the Gemara,
Yeah.
that the Gemara,
Yep.
that the Gemara,
Yeah.
that the Gemara did have leprosy, but then now we don't, is whether the reality has changed. And this halacha should still apply nowadays. Should it still apply? Maybe the reality has changed. And maybe like Bernie suggested, we don't have to follow this. The Magen Avraham appears to take the former approach and suggest that perhaps times have changed and eating or cooking meat and fish is no longer dangerous. Or that it was only dangerous in certain locales such as Babylonia. Magen Avraham, Rabbi Gon Beiner, he lived 1650 maybe early 1700s. The Magen Avram is the main commentary on Orach Chaim, like the Taz and the Shach on Yoredeya. So, hang on. B, I'm teaching a class. I know I'm teaching a class. The Magen Avram appears to take the former, says the Magen Avram, Efshar de Bizman Hazeh ein sakana kol kach. The Chazina Kamet Varma Muskarim B'Gemara. We see other examples, things mentioned in the Gemara, Shem Sakana L'Ruach Ra, that it causes an evil spirit, or Shardvarim, like here, leprosy. V'ha'idna, today, says the Magen Avram, Eino Mazik. Here comes the two most famous words. Dinishtanu ativios, nature has changed. V'gama kolafi teva ha'artzos. Everything follows the locale of the country. That maybe in this country leprosy was rampant, but in that country it's not. However, the majority of poskim, including the Chasam Sofer, maintain that this rule applies today as well. And that's where we live in our world based on this psak of the Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer passed away 1810, 1820, lived in Pressburg, and is the major forerunner of modern Haredi Judaism. All the Hasidim, in fact, the Satmar Hasidim came from the Chasam Sofer. Many of the Hasidim followed his psak, and all the Litvish Gaonim. So the Chasam Sofer is foundational. He held that this applies. One must comply with it entirely, as do all the poskim that we saw quoted in the previous sources. Right? Everything that we quoted before, the Shevet HaLevi, the Yalkut Yosef, the Aruch HaShulchan, the Taz, the Ramah, right? Nobody follows the Magen Avram, who seem to say, no, that does not exist anymore. Says the Chasam Sofer, Efshar da'avalei kemo dovra nesar b'minyan. Number one, guess who's calling? Okay. Yeah, but it could be an emergency. Now, a gzeira, what the Chasam Sofer is talking about, Dovra Nesar B'Minyan, is something that was voted on by Sanhedrin in the times of the Gemara, like Yayin Nesach. They had a debate, they voted, they said Yayin Nesach is Usr. Once that happens, you can't override it. So, for example, today, Gentiles don't, do shichshuch in the wine and offer it for the. It doesn't make a difference. You cannot override a takana of the Gemara because it's nesar b'minyan, and the Rambam gives us a yesod. Unless you create a Sanhedrin bigger b'minyan or b'chachma than the Sanhedrin that prohibited, you can't override it. So who's going to say that our Sanhedrin today? First of all, we don't have Sanhedrin. And if you had a Sanhedrin, what are we going to say, that our Sanhedrin was bigger than the Sanhedrin of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? So that's one of the problems in overriding takonos and gzeiros that existed from the time of Chazal. So efshar davalei kemo davar nesek b'minyan. Perhaps this halacha is like that. The efshar d'lo shaykh b'zeh kol hana tirutzim hanemorim begilui. We're going to learn later on about if you have a glass of water and you leave it overnight exposed. So you're not allowed to drink such a water. Now the question is, why not? So we're going to see we're going to learn about the explanations given, but that's not applicable here by fish. The Chasam Sofer is referring to the prohibition of drinking water that was left unattended due concern for a snake poisoning it, which is discussed in detail later in this year. The Chasam Sofer is saying that although many poskim claim that the prohibition is no longer applicable today, the reasons given there for leniency do not apply to the case of fish and meat. So over there, we're going to see whether we accept it or don't accept it. There's going to be a lot of reasons or explanations given why we don't necessarily follow that prohibition today. But the Chasam Sofer says very clearly that doesn't apply to the gzeira of fish and meat. So according to Magen Avram, it would seem that the concern of the Gemara for leprosy is a regular, natural, sort of scientific thing, and is therefore willing to suggest that if we do not see that leprosy in fact results from eating or cooking fish and meat together would be permitted. On the other hand, the Chassam Sofer and others who maintain that this halacha remains in effect hold that once it was decided to continue to uphold the practice, it may have the status of a rabbinic decree, which may not be repealed even if the reason no longer applies. So right away, if anybody ever asks you, what is this thing about fish and meat? You can say it's a machlokas, Magen Avram, and Chassam Sofer, and we follow the Chassam Sofer. Because halachically, that's really what's going on. Alternatively,
Bernie, the halacha of fish and meat, is it a mamashi complete derabanan? In the Gemara, in the original Gemara, is there derabanan?
yeah, absolutely. It's not, of course it is.
Is there derabanan they shouldn't eat fish and meat together?
Yes,
They didn't base it on any kind of doer rice or anything like that.
no.
So
They based it on the sakana.
sakana.
It was a health thing.
Okay, so clearly, if let's say you're cooking your cholent and a piece of gefilte fish fell in the cholent, even if it was
It's batal b'shishim.
multiple shishim. But what if I'm trying to think of an example where you would this case you would suffer. If there's you weren't sure if there was a mixture of fish and meat, it would be a suffik derabanan l'kula then.
Absolutely. Oh, well, I would say, remember, chamira sakanta misura. So there are aspects of but you see, many things we treated more leniently. So, for example,
Ernie,
Blia
since
doesn't
when do
affect it.
we paskin halacha? I mean, do we have any basis for sakona in medical technology? I mean,
That's what the Gemara had it. So the Magen Avram says we don't have it today, so we don't have to follow it. The Chassam Sofer and all the other poskim who follow Chassam Sofer says first of all, this may have been a takana that was done through voting, and just like Yayin Nesach, we don't understand Yayin Nesach, or today that doesn't exist. We still keep all those gzeras. So that the Chassam Sofer says that's one thing, and number two. We are nizr because minig avosenu Torah, we follow the custom.
Ernie, so it's similar to eating
Now,
chicken.
hang on. Let's hear a third reason. Alternatively, some hold that the concern here is of a mystical nature.
Received a positive COVID test. That's why he was removed from the game. We have no other details at this time. We'll continue, though, to report on this developing story. Obviously, we hope Turner's okay.
Who is that?
And that everyone
Jerry,
else is okay.
who's
There's
got the
no
radio
doubt,
on?
But there you go. Let's go back to the field. And
Yeah.
Whoa, 1 second. Let me turn off now. I'm sorry. I just
Okay, no
put on my
problem.
mistake.
So listen to this Tiferes Tzvi. Ha'emes borish lo nishtanu ativim klal. So he doesn't like what the Magen Avram said, that nature has changed. The ma'olam lo haya b'zeh sakonas tivis. He says this was never a physical thing. Uma shamim kosher l'davar acher eino al pi tava klal. Rak ruach, he says it's an evil spirit. Ulakach ishmitu Rambam. In fact, that's why the Rambam didn't even mention it. Ki yadu dehu hirchi kol inyane haruach ra. The Rambam didn't deal with demons and shadim and all of that. So that's why the Rambam didn't mention that. Ulakushtahu de'ein lachim v'zel tzorach Shabbos v'chadom. In fact, you don't have to be stringent about this about Shabbos and other things, because it's only a spiritual thing. So this is a machlokas, whether or not it doesn't appear to be a danger today. We certainly don't understand the danger, but we still keep the halacha because of the Chassam Sofer minhag avosenu Torah, and the Chazal they made a decree. We can't uproot the decree. What about bittul b'shishim, like what Chaim asked? Although as mentioned, the vast majority of poskim hold that the separation between fish and meat should be maintained. There's one aspect of the issue where there may be more room for leniency due to the doubt as to whether the danger even exists. The Achronim discuss whether the principle of bittul b'shishim, the nullification of forbidden substance in a proportion of 1 to 60, applies to the issue of fish and meat based on danger. Exactly Chaim's question, as it does to others of kashrus. Is it assumed that there is no danger when the ratio of one of them is so small? This issue is also a subject machlokas achronim. The Shach holds that it does apply. The Taz holds that does not, since matters of danger are stricter than a regular prohibition. You see that, Chaim? The Taz says we can't rely on 1 in 60, but the Shach says you can. But the Pischei Tshuva rules practically that one may rely on bittul b'shishin specifically because there may not be any danger involved, especially according to the Rambam. I just want to remind everybody that Pischei Tshuva lived in the 1800s. He's like the Mishnah Brura to Yoredeya. He brought all the more modern halachas, and he's sort of the if you have a printed Shulchan Aruch, he's the most recent commentator on Yoredeya. All the other ones you have to buy, like the Badei HaShulchan. He's Rav Feivel Cohn. He's alive today in Borough Park. I have 3 different volumes of his, the Badei HaShulchan. He's a more modern Yoredeya commentator because he lived in the late 19th century, early 20th century. I think he's still alive. But the Pischei Tshuva lived in the late 1800s. Of course, the Mishnah Brura is the more recent commentator, but you don't see him in the Shulchan Aruch, the big printed versions. You have to buy Mishnah Brura to see that. If you have a suffix, the kula alma. The Rav Gufre, he was an expert in medicine, the natural things. He removed this whole thing about this fish, the Atri Bistrom because of his huge intellect. He also thought that maybe the nature has changed, doesn't cause leprosy anymore. However, we don't rely on that. We don't eat them together. We still separate them. The Pischei Tshuva says, the Chassam Sofer said it may be something that was prohibited because Chazal voted on it, and we can override that. We call makom hirvachnu. We benefit. Shiatzanu mechamira sakanta. Listen, we see tons of people eating this; they don't get sick. It's clearly not a danger anymore. The Efshar shigam bismanim lo yasakana el b'min binta. Even Tam Chazal, he says maybe it was only a specific fish that caused the danger. Not our fish. He says it's a light rabbinic prohibition. Now, even though he says, like what Chaim asked, that when they vote something and they make a gzeira, it has like ke'ein doraisa, hainu haneser mishum siag v'geder iser, aval b'chi haigavna kila tuva. He says clearly, even though a davar shebeminyan normally is treated stringently, here we can be more lenient. Thus, according to Pischei Tshuva, one may apply the rule of bittul b'shishin because even if it has the status of rabbinic decree, that may not be overturned. The aspect of danger may not be present, and we can at least apply the standard principle of bittul b'shishin, right? Maybe according to the Taz, it doesn't apply in danger. But since today there's a question whether danger exists, you can rely on the Shach who says 1 in Shishim. Rav Ovadia Yosef also says Bittul applies. So like Chaim's question, if a piece of gefilte fish fell in the chulent, it would be Batul b'Shishim. Klal the milsa the after midi the sakanta kagon basu v'dogim yesh lo harish Batul b'Shishim. He says anything midei sakana would be nullified. Mikosh ken sheyesh od kama snifim lakal. There's other reasons to be makel. All the things we discussed. But Torah chasam also, the Torah does not want Jews to lose money. If you've cooked this fish, we don't want you to throw it away. Many other great achronim have spread the rule to be lenient, so we can follow this. There are a number of other points of comparison with the rules of Basar B'Cholov that are worthwhile to mention. First, poskim dispute whether one may serve fish and meat at the same time, assuming each individual does not eat both together. Gentlemen, remember we learned you can't bring a plate of meat and a plate of cheese onto the table at the same time. So that's what they're asking here. Can you bring meat and fish to the table at the same time? The Darkei Tshuva cites one opinion that forbids it. But Rav Vosner is a Shevet HaLevi. He's usually very machmer, writes it's permitted. So the custom is to be machmer not to do so. Second, there's a discussion whether one eating meat may sit at the same table as one eating fish, which is not allowed for Basar B'Cholov. According to Kaf HaChaim, it's forbidden. While again, according to the Shevet HaLevi, it's permitted. Third, Poskim argues to whether one may eat an onion cut with a meat knife together with fish. Remember, even though a meat knife beyond 24 hours, we say there is no lifgam. It's always, it comes back lishvach. So the meat flavor goes into the onion no matter when. And because onion is a davar charif with the sharpness of the knife. So the question is, those onions now are fleshik. Can you eat the onions with fish? According to Shevet HaLevi, it is permitted only in cases of need. According to one opinion of Darkei Tshuva, it's forbidden. While according to the Sefer Davar Charif, it's permitted. So you have three different opinions. Okay. Final halacha tonight, eating fish with dairy. So far, we've only seen sources that forbid eating or cooking fish together with meat due to the potential danger involved. Does the same concern apply to eating or cooking fish together with dairy? According to the Torah, it is permitted, presumably because the Gemara and Rishonim never suggested that the danger applies in this case as well. Dogim v'chagovim mutter la'achon b'cholav. Says fish and grasshoppers can be eaten with milk. The Torah. We Ashkenazim don't eat grasshoppers, but the Ashkenazim, certainly the Moroccans, had a tradition to eat grasshoppers that were kosher. In contrast, the Beis Yosef writes that one should not eat them together due to the concern of danger. Wow. So the Beis Yosef comment, who was the Beis Yosef? Rav Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. In his comment on the Torah, he wrote, Dogim v'chagavim mutter la'achlon b'chalav. From a halachic point, you can eat them. But you should not eat fish with milk because of danger. The problem is pointed out by the Darkei Moshe, who's the Ramah. The Pri Sheshach and Taz is that in Orach Chaim 173, only the prohibition of fish and meat together is recorded. Nothing is mentioned by the Shulchan Aruch concerning not eating fish and dairy together. What then is the meaning of the sentence in the Beis Yosef when he said, look at Orach Chaim Siman Kufayin Gimel. He's sending you there, but it doesn't say anything about eating fish and milk together. So the Prisha suggests that perhaps there was a typo in the Beis Yosef, and he meant to write that one should not eat meat with fish due to the danger, and it's a typographic error. Darkei Moshe Kozav al Zeh, Zulu Lora Itzi Miyomai Nizorim Bezeh. I never saw anybody worry about eating fish and milk. The Gam Bar Chaim Simin Kufayin Gamel Eino. It's not there either. Ela Shalom La'achlu B'Basar Mishum Sakana. There in Kufayin Gimel it says you can't eat milk, can't eat meat with fish for danger. Aval Chalav Shari. V'lachein Nirish Nis'ar L'Rav Beis Yosef Basar B'Chalav. He said he thinks the Beis Yosef made a mistake, and he put the word Basar B'Chalav. That means he should have said and instead he put the word Chalav. And that's what the Shach says too. By the way, for these later Achronim to say that the Shulchan Aruch made a mistake, you have to imagine is a major statement. Avalu tos, ki lo niskar shem el dogim im basar asur mishum sakana. Aval b'chalav lo shamanav lo ra'inu, says the Shach. We never heard, we never saw. Every day Jews cook fish with milk and there's no problem. So gentlemen, today I'm going to leave you like a Perils of Pauline, and we're going to see this Rav Levi ben Chaviv, the Maharal Bach, and how he resolves this kasha on the Beis Yosef, and finish the discussion of fish and milk. And then next week we'll deal with other forbidden things like uncovered liquids and other isurim.